There's probably an idea you keep returning to. It might be something ambitious, like changing careers or starting a business, but it could also be much smaller. Making a video, learning an instrument, writing to someone you admire, or finally sharing something you've been working on. Whenever the idea appears, there's a brief moment when it feels exciting. You can see what it might become, and maybe you can even see a slightly different version of yourself on the other side of it. Then the objections begin. You don't know enough yet. Someone else has already done it better. The timing isn't right. You need different equipment, more money, or a clearer plan. And even if you solved all of those problems, there's still the possibility that you could put the thing into the world and discover that nobody cares. To be fair, some of these objections may be reasonable. Ideas do have problems, and enthusiasm can make us overlook them. But there's a point where thinking stops helping us prepare and starts helping us avoid. We continue researching, comparing, and reorganizing the plan because every hour spent preparing delays the moment when reality gets to respond. What we're usually waiting for is some feeling of certainty that we have chosen the best course of action. We want to know that the idea will work before we commit time to it, partly because we don't want to look back and feel that the time was wasted. The problem is that the best course of action often can't be identified from where we're standing. Some of the information we need only becomes available after we begin. You can spend months thinking about whether you'd enjoy making videos, but you won't really know until you've made a few. You can research a new career in enormous detail without learning how the work feels on an ordinary Tuesday morning. You can outline a business, study its market, and calculate every possible expense, but none of that tells you exactly how another person will respond when you finally ask them to pay for what you've made. This isn't an argument against planning. That would be silly. Planning can save us from obvious mistakes, and when a decision is expensive, dangerous, or difficult to reverse, careful thought matters a great deal. But planning has a natural limit. It can only work with the information we already have. When the missing information is out in the world, no amount of private thought can bring it to us. Imagine two people who both want to start making videos. The first decides to approach it properly. They research cameras, compare editing programs, study successful channels, and spend a lot of time trying to choose the right niche. Every few weeks, however, the research reveals another problem. The camera they want is expensive. Their room doesn't look professional. The niche is crowded. Their ideas aren't original enough. By the time they feel ready to solve one issue, they've learned enough to worry about 3 more. The second person starts making videos with whatever they have. The first video is awkward, the sound is inconsistent, and they speak too quickly whenever they feel nervous. Maybe nobody watches the first 5. Probably nobody does. But by the 10th video, they're beginning to notice things. They enjoy telling stories more than giving advice. Their phone camera is fine, but the bad audio is genuinely distracting. A subject they expected people to care about receives no response, while an offhand observation in another video prompts several comments. After a year, the first person may know more about cameras, platforms, and growth strategies. The second person knows more about making their own videos. They've learned something about their voice, their habits, their audience, and the kind of work they're willing to keep doing when the initial excitement wears off. They haven't necessarily succeeded. What they have done is replace a collection of guesses with experience. The frustrating part is that the first person was trying to avoid making a bad first video, but that bad first video was always waiting for them. Being a beginner is not a stage that can be removed through preparation. Preparation can make the beginning somewhat less chaotic, but eventually everyone has to do something they haven't done before, and it will probably look like it. This is where perfectionism becomes more complicated than simply having high standards. An idea that remains in the imagination can remain perfect because it never has to become specific. The book that hasn't been written could still be brilliant. The business that exists only in a notebook could still be enormously successful. The conversation that keeps getting rehearsed could still go exactly as planned. Once someone acts, all of that possibility is exchanged for one real result, and the real result is almost always smaller and messier than the one they imagined. That can feel strangely personal. If the project turns out badly, perhaps it means the person wasn't as talented as they hoped. If they change direction after 6 months, perhaps it proves they didn't have the discipline to continue. It can be more comfortable to protect the identity of someone who could do something than to become someone who has tried and now has evidence. But a first attempt doesn't reveal what someone is ultimately capable of. It shows what they could produce at a particular moment, with their current skills and under a particular set of circumstances. That may not be flattering information, but it is useful information, and something can be done with it. Inaction gives us nothing comparable. Because there's no visible failure, it feels neutral, as though both time and options have been preserved. Meanwhile, the time still passes. We simply arrive at the end of it with the same unanswered questions and no more ability than we had before. This is why time spent trying is not automatically wasted, at least when there is a willingness to learn from what happened. Taken too literally, that idea can sound a little too comforting. People do lose years to situations they wish they had left sooner. Patterns get repeated, the wrong goals get pursued, and sometimes people endure experiences they would never choose again. Calling all of that meant to be can flatten the real cost of it, and not every painful experience needs to be defended as necessary. The point is that the value of an experience isn't limited to whether it produced the result that was originally intended. A business can close without erasing what it taught someone about people, money, communication, or their own tolerance for risk. A creative project can receive almost no attention and still teach someone how to organize an idea, finish something difficult, or recover after showing imperfect work to other people. The wrong career might reveal which environment brings out someone's best work. Even an abandoned hobby can leave behind a skill, a friendship, or a better understanding of how learning happens. Sometimes the lesson is simply that the thing once desired is no longer wanted. That can be disappointing, especially after spending a long time pursuing it, but it is still knowledge. One possible future no longer has to occupy space in the imagination, and the energy once directed toward it can go somewhere else. The project ends, but the person remains. What has been learned travels into the next attempt, where it combines with lessons from other parts of life. Often the transfer isn't obvious. The confidence developed from performing might help years later in an interview. A failed product may teach someone to listen more carefully, improving work that has nothing to do with the original idea. Something learned while trying to solve one problem may sit quietly in the background until a completely different problem gives it a use. That knowledge accumulates. It becomes part of a person's judgment, and judgment is difficult to measure because it often appears as a choice made quickly, without any clear memory of all the experiences that taught it. Of course, having an experience does not guarantee that a lesson will be taken from it. The same mistake can be repeated for years while being defended in exactly the same way. Experience provides the material, but reflection is what makes that material useful. At some point, it becomes necessary to look back and ask what actually happened, which assumptions were wrong, what was surprising, and what should change before the next attempt. This is an important part of just do it wrong. The goal isn't to keep doing something badly and call the repetition progress. The goal is to act, pay attention, and allow each attempt to inform the one that follows. It also doesn't mean charging recklessly into every decision. If a possible mistake could seriously harm someone, then it makes sense to slow down, seek advice, and think carefully. But many of the choices that cause paralysis are far more reversible than they feel. They become enormous declarations about the rest of a person's life when they could be treated as small experiments. You don't have to decide whether you are going to become a writer. You can write one piece and let somebody read it. You don't need to build an entire business before learning whether anyone wants the product. You can make a simple version and offer it to a few people. You don't have to decide today whether a different career will make you happy. You can speak with someone who does the work, take a class, or find a small project that gives you some contact with it. A useful first step is small enough that getting it wrong won't destroy you, but real enough to produce information. It should place the idea outside your head in some form, even if only one other person sees it. Instead of asking whether a direction is definitely right, ask what taking one step in that direction would teach you. The first action doesn't need to settle the future. It only needs to make the next decision a little less theoretical. So think about an idea you've been repeatedly talking yourself out of. What is the question you keep trying to answer before you begin? Maybe it's whether you're good enough, whether anyone will care, or whether you'll still enjoy the work once it becomes difficult. Now find the smallest real action that would give you some evidence. Give yourself an evening, a weekend, or perhaps 1 week. Write the page, record the rough video. Send the message, make the offer, or show someone the unfinished version. Afterward, don't immediately judge the entire idea as a success or a failure. Ask what you know now that you couldn't have known before. Even if the result confirms one of your fears, you have gained something more useful than the fear itself. A specific problem that can be examined, changed, or accepted. Certainty, confidence, and then action may seem like the natural order. More often, especially in creative work and ordinary life decisions, the order is reversed. Someone acts within reasonable limits, notices what happens, adjusts, and gradually becomes more confident because experience has shown that reality can be dealt with even when it doesn't cooperate. The entire path doesn't need to be visible before the first step, and that first step doesn't need to prove that the path should be followed forever. It only needs to give the idea a chance to exist outside the imagination. So make the smallest honest version of it. Let it be clumsy. Pay attention to what happens, and try not to make exactly the same mistakes the next time. Just do it wrong, and let the experience begin teaching you how to do it better.